They didn't ask. They didn't even slow down. They just took it. A chair pulled back without permission. A hand on an arm that didn't belong to them. A voice raised just enough to draw attention. "Excuse me. You're in the wrong place." She looked up, confused for a moment, like anyone would when a stranger decides they have authority over you. Like when someone cuts in line and tells you to move. Like when you're spoken to as if you wandered somewhere you don't belong. She didn't argue. She stayed seated. That was the mistake. Laughter came first. The kind that says, "This isn't serious." Phones followed. A few people leaned in, pretending to care while hoping to capture something worth sharing later. Someone whispered, "Is she staff?" Someone else said, "She must be lost." No one corrected them. A voice called for security before she could even speak again. She stood up slowly, not because she agreed, but because hands were already reaching for her chair. Fingers brushed her arm, guiding her away like she was an inconvenience that needed clearing. She said nothing, and silence was taken as permission. A guard stepped closer. Another blocked her path back. Authority didn't ask questions. It looked at the people with confidence, with money, with comfort, and chose a side. The crowd watched. Some smiled. Some recorded. Most did nothing. Because moments like this feel familiar. Because everyone has seen someone pushed aside and thought, "At least it's not me." Because staying quiet is easier than being next. She stood there, surrounded, reduced to an interruption in someone else's evening. What they didn't know was that the woman they were humiliating had the power to end the entire night. This was the kind of room where everyone believed they belonged. Crystal glasses lined the tables. Soft music filled the space just enough to remind people they were somewhere important. Conversations stayed low, confident. No one asked what anyone did for a living. They assumed. You could tell who felt comfortable here by how little they looked around. Coats were handed off without thank yous. Seats were taken without checking names. People moved as if the space had already agreed with them. This wasn't just an event. It was a ranking system. The tables closer to the center meant something. So did the badges. So did who security nodded at without asking questions. The rules weren't written anywhere, but everyone knew them, or thought they did. If you looked right, you belonged. If you sounded right, you stayed. If you didn't, someone would eventually remind you. That's how rooms like this work. People with money rarely introduce themselves. They expect recognition. And when it doesn't come, they replace it with confidence. Confidence fills in for proof. No one checked invitations. No one confirmed assignments. Status was decided in seconds, based on posture, clothes, skin, comfort. Mistakes didn't feel like mistakes here. They felt like corrections. Across the room, laughter rose easily. Servers moved fast. Security stood still, watching for disruptions, not injustices. The night was designed to flow smoothly, without friction, without questions. And anyone who slowed that flow became the problem. In a room built on appearances, one assumption would cost them everything. Her name is Naomi Reed. She wasn't loud. She wasn't trying to stand out. If you passed her earlier, you might not remember her face. Her dress was neat, not flashy. No logos. No dramatic jewelry. The kind of outfit you wear when you expect to be there, not when you're trying to prove it. The kind of look that doesn't ask for attention. Naomi had arrived early. She'd checked the program. Not because she was nervous, but because she was prepared. She knew how the evening was supposed to run. She knew when things mattered and when they didn't. She noticed details others ignored. The way staff kept glancing toward one table. The way certain guests never waited in line. The way security relaxed around familiar faces. She didn't interrupt anyone. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't explain why she was there. She listened. People often confuse quiet with uncertainty. They think if someone doesn't speak up immediately, it's because they don't belong. Naomi had learned long ago that explaining yourself too early gives others permission to decide your value. So she stayed calm. When the voices rose around her earlier, she didn't panic. When fingers pointed in her direction, she didn't rush to defend herself. She had nothing to prove to strangers who had already made up their minds. She wasn't there for recognition. She wasn't there to impress. She was there because her presence mattered, even if no one in that room realized it yet. She didn't come to be seen. She came because the event couldn't exist without her. They didn't think of themselves as bad people. That's what made it easy. They were used to rooms like this, used to being welcomed, used to walking in late and still being accommodated. The kind of people who never check the seating chart because it has never failed them before. The man spoke first, his voice relaxed, almost friendly, like he was correcting a small mistake. "You're in our seats." No question, no pause, just expectation. The woman beside him scanned the table, then Naomi, then the room around them. Her eyes lingered on Naomi's clothes, her posture, the way she wasn't rushing to explain herself. That silence seemed to bother her. "This area is reserved," she said. "Staff usually sit farther back." It was said lightly, practiced, like something she'd said before without consequence. That single word did the work for her. Once it was spoken, the situation felt settled in their minds. There was no need to be careful, no need to apologize. You don't apologize to someone you believe is there to serve you. Naomi answered calmly. She said the seat had been assigned to her. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't add details. She didn't argue. The man laughed softly and shook his head. "No," he said. "That's not right. Not I don't think so. Not let me check. Just certainty." The woman sighed and glanced around, already looking for help. Not for clarity. For backup. "These things happen all the time," she said. "You probably picked up the wrong card." A few people nearby started paying attention. Not because they cared, but because discomfort draws an audience. Someone leaned in closer. Someone else pulled out a phone, pretending to check messages while recording. Naomi could feel the shift. The moment when a private correction becomes a public moment. She repeated herself once. Calm. Steady. "This is my seat." That was when the tone changed. The man straightened, his patience thinning. The woman crossed her arms. "You're holding things up," she said. "Everyone here belongs. You don't." She didn't say it directly. She didn't have to. Belonging in rooms like this is decided fast. Based on how confidently you stand your ground. Based on how others react when you speak. Based on whether security looks toward you or past you. To them, Naomi wasn't a guest who needed respect. She was a problem delaying their night. They weren't trying to hurt her. They were trying to correct her. And that's how entitlement works. It doesn't feel loud or angry. It feels reasonable. Feels deserved. They didn't recognize her, and that made her invisible to them. The voices around the table grew louder. Not angry but certain. The man gestured toward the empty chair beside him like he was directing traffic. "Let's fix this," he said. "You need to move." The woman didn't wait for a response. She turned her head slightly and waved someone over. Not with urgency. With familiarity. "Security," she said. "Can you help her find the right place?" The word help was doing a lot of work. Naomi stayed where she was. Not out of defiance, but because she still believed someone would pause long enough to check. To ask. To look twice. That pause never came. A few people nearby started watching openly now. A couple of phones were already pointed in her direction. In curiosity. Moments like this make good stories later. Someone laughed. Too loudly. The kind of laugh meant to show which side they were on. "Wow," a voice said from the table behind them. "This is awkward." The guard arrived and looked between the couple and Naomi. He didn't ask for a name. He didn't check the place card. He looked at the people who seemed comfortable and made a decision. "Ma'am," he said, "you'll need to step away from the table." Naomi spoke again, calm and clear. "This seat was assigned to me." The man sighed, irritated now. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said. "Just move." The woman folded her arms and leaned closer. "You don't belong here," she said quietly, loud enough for others to hear. "You're embarrassing yourself." The crowd leaned in. That's when the second guard stepped forward. One hand reached for the back of Naomi's chair. Another brushed her arm, guiding her up, as if the decision had already been made. She stood slowly. Not because she agreed. Because she was being moved. A ripple went through the room. Phones came up higher. A few people shook their heads, not at what was happening, but at the disruption. Naomi said nothing, and that silence was taken as confirmation that they were right. The moment hands were placed on her, the night crossed a line it couldn't walk back from. Once she was on her feet, the room relaxed. That was the signal everyone had been waiting for. The problem was being handled. The evening could continue. The man adjusted his suit like the situation had already ended. The woman exhaled, relieved, as if she just corrected a minor inconvenience. Security stayed close, not to protect her, but to make sure she didn't return. Naomi stood there, steady, her hands at her sides, her face calm. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't ask for sympathy. She didn't look around for support. People mistake calm for defeat all the time. Someone behind her muttered, "About time." Another person smiled and lowered their phone, satisfied they'd captured enough. The man leaned in slightly, his voice low but sharp. "Next time," he said, "pay attention to where you sit." The woman laughed. "You really thought this was your table?" she said. "That's bold." Naomi finally spoke again. Her voice didn't cut through the room. It didn't need to. It was quiet, measured, just loud enough for the people closest to her. "You should stop," she said. "This won't end the way you think." The man raised his eyebrows and chuckled. "Is that a threat?" he asked. The woman smiled and shook her head. "Please," she said. "You're done here." Security shifted closer, forming a barrier between Naomi and the table. Not one of them looked at her place card. Not one of them asked her name. They had already decided who mattered. Naomi said nothing else. She didn't explain. She waited, and the room filled the silence with confidence. Then the music stopped. The music cut off mid-note. At first, people thought it was a technical issue. A few guests glanced toward the stage. Someone laughed, assuming it would start again. Then a voice carried across the room. "Stop. Everyone stop." A man moved quickly through the crowd, his expression tight. His steps hurried in a way that didn't match the calm of the evening. Conversations fell apart as he passed. People stepped back without knowing why. He wasn't supposed to be rushing. People like him usually arrive early, settle in, and stay composed. Panic doesn't suit them. But it was there, clear in his voice, clear in his face. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Security turned immediately. The man who had been confident moments ago straightened. The woman's smile faded just a little. The newcomer looked at Naomi. Then his face changed. "Naomi," he said, clearly, using her name without hesitation. The room shifted. Not loudly, not all at once, but something moved. A few phones lowered. Someone at the back whispered, "Did he just say her name?" The man stepped closer, his voice sharper now. "Why is she standing here?" he asked. "Who told you to remove her?" Security hesitated for the first time. "I said stop," he repeated. "Right now." No one argued. Hands dropped. Space opened around Naomi. The guard stepped back, suddenly unsure. The man turned toward the couple. "Do not touch her," he said. "Not another second." The room was silent now. The kind of silence where no one dares to fill it. The name they spoke froze the room. The man turned back to the room. His voice steadied, but the urgency didn't leave it. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "there's been a serious mistake." People leaned in, not to record this time, to understand. He gestured toward Naomi, who was still standing where they'd left her. "This event is happening because of her," he continued. "She is the principal benefactor behind tonight." A breath moved through the room, quiet, unsteady. The man beside the table blinked. The woman's mouth opened, then closed. The speaker went on, choosing his words carefully. "She is also the majority owner of the organization you're celebrating tonight." Someone whispered, "Owner." Phones lowered. Hands froze midair. "And starting this quarter," he added, "she serves as chief executive." The room didn't react all at once. Couldn't. Shock doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like stillness, like people replaying the last few minutes in their heads and realizing there's no way to fix them. Naomi didn't move. She didn't smile. She didn't look around for reactions. She simply met the eyes of the people who had spoken over her earlier. The couple stood stiff. The confidence they'd carried so easily now had nowhere to go. The man cleared his throat, trying to speak, but nothing came out. Naomi said nothing. She didn't need to, and suddenly the people who felt untouchable realized they weren't. Naomi finally spoke. "You told me to move," she said. "You called security before asking a question. You allowed hands to be placed on me." Her voice didn't shake. She wasn't accusing. She was stating facts. "You didn't check the seating. You didn't ask my name. You decided who I was based on what you saw." The man opened his mouth. Naomi lifted her hand slightly. He stopped. "This isn't personal," she continued. "It's about conduct." She turned to the head of security. "Please document everything that happened at this table," she said, "from the first instruction to the physical contact." Then she looked back at the couple. "You violated our code of conduct," she said, "publicly, in front of staff, partners, and guests." The woman's voice cracked. "We didn't know." Naomi nodded once. "That's the point," she said. "You didn't need to know. You needed to act differently." She turned again, this time toward the man who had interrupted the room. "They will be escorted out," Naomi said. "Effective immediately." There was no pause, no debate. "And their access to future events is revoked," she added. "Human resources will follow up tomorrow." The man's shoulders dropped. The woman reached for his arm, suddenly unsure of herself. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult them. She didn't explain further. The decision had been made. Security stepped in again, this time facing the other direction. Power doesn't shout. It decides. That moment stayed with the room long after the couple was gone. Not because of the removal, but because of everything that led up to it. The assumptions made in seconds. The silence that felt safer than speaking up. The way people watched, recorded, laughed, and waited for someone else to act. Most people in that room didn't do anything wrong on paper. They just didn't do anything at all. And that's how moments like this survive. Not through cruelty alone, but through comfort. Through the belief that staying quiet keeps you out of trouble. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She didn't embarrass anyone on purpose. She didn't demand respect. She simply refused to accept being treated as less. And the room had to adjust. Because the truth is, many of us have been there. Overlooked, spoken over, moved aside, judged before we had a chance to speak. And we remember those moments, not for what was said, but for who stayed silent. So here's the question. What word describes what she reclaimed that night? Was it respect? Dignity? Power? Justice? Write one word in the comments. If the story meant something to you, share it with someone who's been overlooked. Subscribe for more stories where assumptions fall apart and quiet strength takes the room back. And remember this, never assume you outrank the person who made the room possible.